as I said, when I came here, the whole purpose wasn't to try and shill you a system. Really, we're looking at adjusting attitudes. I can tell from you all just being here, you obviously have some kind of level of interest in school safeguarding. Really, it's how do we change the attitudes of the parents, and how do we get the school and the parents working together? How do we prevent these civil wars? How do we prevent these fallouts? How do we prevent denial? How do we prevent finger pointing? By having the same set of information shared by parents and the school, and allowing them to access it, control it whenever they like, it means that conversations can be had. You can start opening up dialogues. The school can raise things with the parent that maybe they're concerned with, and vice versa. The system itself, this is probably the only product shop we have. The whole thing has been designed to be completely simple. Very much like an iPhone app would be. There's no technical terminology used. It's all just big, giant links and images. It's very, very simple. Of course, we do provide training with that as well when we're providing it, because it's not a magic bullet. And the reason for this simplicity is, as I mentioned before, we don't want IT involved. We think that them coming into the digital safeguarding, although necessary, it's not going to add the value, and it's not going to have the same mantra, the same mindset of safeguarding that you all have. So this is a system for you. It's not for them.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
Have you rolled this out to schools already? Or
yes.
Schools? So what happens with the children in terms of giving permission to that?
Well, they will have some kind of agreement policy in place for safeguarding.
Schools do that, or the
parents
do that?
The schools do it and the parents sign it.
Okay.
That's not something that's standardised within us, but every school that we've worked with does have kind of a safeguarding policy that the parent does have to be aware of. However, with this, we actively want to bring the parents into it. We're not trying to hide it from the parents. It's very much the opposite. So when we're providing the training, we're going to try and encourage the parents to download the app.
So does it usually come through the school? Because I'm just thinking when you're talking about the children having their phones and their buses going home, that's not within our say-so, is it?
No, completely not. So we need to get the parents on board so that they can lock down the phone.
Yeah.
And then it's very, very simple just to point that phone towards our server where...
So I'm guessing you have a bit more success with maybe your year 6s to year 8s, but not necessarily after that? Is that right?
I wouldn't say less success. It depends more on the area than the age, I find. With some of the schools we've worked with, just to hold my hand up, some of them have said we're actually not going to use the parental features because we don't personally think that the parents are going to use it. And we don't want to be seen to be spying on the kids or forcing something down their throats. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, can I just ask about ethics and the rights of the child? Yeah, I'm sure you've been asked this before. I'm sure you've got an answer for it, but I'm just sitting here as a teacher and as a parent. It feels very big brother.
No, of course.
And I think it sounds like it could potentially contradict all that kind of conversation and training you do with children. Then suddenly we're then going to spy on them. I just wondered where ethics fits into this and how children have a voice in this, because you're talking a lot about schools and you're talking a lot about parents, but what about the child?
Well, first of all, we do see it as a form of child protection anyway. I think with ethics, this is going to sound so corporate devil, but ethics can be quite subjective. When we're looking at something like Securely, it really is working as an approach with both schools and parents together. Any kind of conventional protection measures can be circumvented so easily, and we all know that our children kind of run rings around us when it comes to these sorts of things. A lot of the network managers I speak with think that they do have a duty of care to a point, but if it's not on my network, it's not really my problem. If you're going to implement a measure like that, it's not really helping. The child isn't going to use the school Wi-Fi if they can just bring their phone out and go on 4G, and then they're unmonitored and unprotected. So I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of the ethics conversation. But I think, certainly in my experience with the people we've worked with, they would rather have the protection than not. Does that?
So are you assuming that when you work with the product with the school, it's the responsibility of the school to work in partnership with the parents, to then work in partnership with young people, so they understand it?
Yeah.
Why? Rather than be doing it anyway. Is that what?
Yeah, absolutely.
I sort of kind of feel that we're coming from the point of view that all young people are doing like evil things online. I mean, there was a quote earlier that said about, in thinking of the bad things about the internet, we're not celebrating the good things about the internet. So there are a lot of young people doing very positive things online. So I just worry about
the privacy part of it. Young people
it
have
comes
privacy.
down to the rights of the child and them actually having a voice in what is actually being controlled for them.
There's an element as well of we're kind of ducking the issue of having to educate them.
Exactly. So where's the resilience building?
Teaching them about safeguarding.
Yeah.
I'm teaching them about fake profile, fake news.
Because once they leave this safe environment, they're then going to have to face all the issues that we've been talking about this morning anyway.
And have to learn to make those decisions. Come forward and speak.
And what you're saying is completely right. But I think with that, you are sort of still seeing it as the school and the parents on one side of the wall and the child on the other side of the wall. With the parents being able to access this level of information, they can sit down and actually speak with the child. We've got one of our case studies, for example, where the school's using this as an educational tool because the parent can see what the child is doing in school in terms of their research. If they've got an assignment on World War II, for example, they'll be able to speak to them about that and they'll have that inside track. Because it's not going to be any great secret to the child that this is happening. But by doing it, we can actually encourage them to use the internet responsibly. They have these perpetual profiles. It's a sad fact of life that everything you do online is tracked at any level. And it's about how to be responsible online. I think that's better coming from the parent than it is from, say, I don't know, the school or even the government.
Does it rely on the child giving permission though? Because there's a lot of the GDPR that said that children about 13 years old and over can then actually request their own information if they want to that's kept at school. So there is a sort of more of a kind of conversation about children having those kind of rights to access. So is this something that you get children to sign up to, or is it just that it comes from the parents who are buying the phone for the child? Is that the idea?
In my experience, we haven't had any children have to give consent. That element has always been handled by the school. Unfortunately, I don't really know the ins and outs of how that's managed. Again, I would assume that is part of the policy, that the agreement that
Because I can sort of get it when you're talking about school, that you'd have that, it's a little bit like a filter that you might have ordinarily, but I don't get a bit out of school because that seems to me that that's the child's rights or the I don't know how safe we are on that.
We have a setting within the software that is enabled by default, which is that the school can't actually see the take-home data. So we put up a digital partition to say that the parents can see the take-home side and the school can see the school activity, and they can't see each other. Now, both parties agreed to lift that wall and have greater visibility than they can, but by default it is going to be the parents' responsibility to see the data outside and the school can't access it.
It's the school's responsibility if there's internet bullying, even if it's outside school.
They'll be part of it.
Our responsibility to get involved in it. So it's not true that they can do things at home and it's not up to us to do it. It's absolutely up to us.
It's an impact on this child. Okay, 5 minutes.
5 minutes.